Hello, I am Xarkun, this is World of Warships Legends, and today I've got my first impressions review on the legendary British battleship Conqueror. We're going to look at my commander build, my mod selection, the armor viewer, and then we're going to examine a couple of clips of the Conqueror against the Yamato before we jump into the main feature game of this first impressions review, a game featuring 272,000 damage done. Bit of a doozy there. I should say that the Conqueror does look particularly excellent with this Santa 2021 camo. In fact, I hope to stock up enough of these and hold on to them for long enough that when the Conqueror comes fully into the game, I can make a permanent camo for it, because I do think this red color scheme that sort of looks like flames in some places suits this ship very well. But, we're not going to spend too much time looking at the ship as nice as it is. We'll transition, take a look at my commander build, Ezerlane Nelson. Now, I did show this build on my Nelson video yesterday. The Kondo inspiration wasn't fully implemented. I'm testing Kondo out, or I plan to, on the Conqueror. Can't remember exactly what the build was that I used for the game, though. But this is what I'm testing out, and I'll show you why here. On the mod selection, we've got the Turret Traverse mod in the first slot, Propulsion in the second, and Concealment in the third. Yes, this is the first battleship in the game that has access to the Concealment mod. And we can talk about whether that is a bit of a useful thing later on in the video. And we'll talk about what you can get your concealment down to with that and my Kondo inspiration. 4-slot, main battery reload mod. Now, taking a look at the armor viewer, the Conqueror has 32mm bow plating and 32mm stern plating, which means that it can't be overmatched by anything except the Yamato. Although, judging by this armor viewer, you might think this is a very heavily armored ship. It really isn't. The armor belt, you can see the upper part, also 32mm, can be overmatched by the Yamato, and a 406mm lower belt there. Now that is pretty thick. The armor will bounce 16-inch guns just fine, although it does have a lot of superstructure that is vulnerable to being hit for a lot of damage. The interesting thing, though, is if we take a look at the Citadel. The top plate on the Citadel, you'll notice in the center, very thin 19mm top plating. And since that upper armor, that 32mm section, can be overmatched by the Yamato, that is penetrated at any angle, I think this ship is probably extremely vulnerable to plunging fire from the Yamato, or maybe even battleships with 16-inch guns that are able to penetrate the deck in the center of the ship. If they hit that 19mm plate, they're going to go right through and strike the Citadel. So, even though it looks heavily armored, it really isn't. And the Yamato is a pretty tough ship to deal with in certain instances with the Conqueror. On the other hand, it does get the super heal, and it has ridiculous HE. So these first two clips are going to be of me dealing with some Yamatos. Here we take a shot from the Yamato. It does hit the belt armor, and so it does minimal damage. Some of the shells I think hit that 32mm and did damage, but we're too close to the Yamato for the shells to come down vertically through that 32mm armor and strike our Citadel. And we are presenting about, I'd say, a 50 or so degree angle to him. So angling that armor is going to help. In fact, he was so unimpressed with his damage results there that he's shooting at somebody else. Meanwhile, we are shooting the high explosive at him. So 10k there on that salvo, pretty nasty, and that didn't even start a fire. When it does, things get even spicier. He does have a fire burning on him, though. It's not us. In any case, the Yamato, big threat to this ship. And yet, this ship can still absolutely dominate a Yamato. It's still going to take damage. No doubt about that. What was that? About 8k or so? We hit him back for 13. Good trade there. So as long as you're angled in this thing, you can trade with the Yamato. And ideally, you can burn it down before it really kills you. Plus, you have that excellent repair party. You can see the little green bar next to my yellow bar of health that shows just how many hit points I can reacquire if I use that consumable. And you can see that this penetration damage, even though it is from the armor piercing, quite a bit of that is recoverable. So, as long as you can maintain a defensive stance against Yamatos and fire high explosive at them, you can burn them down in many situations. We've got a fire now on that Yamato. We are racking up the damage totals with our HE penetrations and our fire damage, and there is another fire on that Yamato. I don't think we are going to end up taking him out in the course of this game, but that's just a little bit of an indication of how to play this ship against the Yamato. I've had people talk to me, tell me that this ship doesn't stand up well to the Yamato, and I just disagree with that. Obviously, it can get damaged, but so many of your hit points are recoverable, and the Yamato just can't stand up to the high explosive of the Conqueror. If you want further verification of this, we'll take a look at this clip here, in which I am essentially alone in this position. I've got a Yamato out there 15 kilometers away, and he is not the only ship that's going to shoot at me. Now, unfortunately, I am giving a pretty big amount of broadside, and I'm lucky there to only take about 10,000 damage. Closing the angle now, though, trying to present again that 40-degree angle or 50-degree angle or so. It's kind of like the Nelson, honestly. This ship is an incredible tank in a similar way, and as I alluded to in the previous clip, even if this Yamato damages me, there he hits me for 10k, good portion of those hit points are still recoverable with this repair party. For reference, this repair party restores 1,289 hit points per second, which is actually 6 hit points better than the Nelson's super repair party. It lasts for 20 seconds, meaning you can potentially regain up to 25,780 hit points with this repair party. Obviously, you can't do that in all circumstances. The only damage that is 100% recoverable is fire damage. AP overpen damage and regular AP penetrations, typically 50% of that is recoverable, but I suspect the Conqueror's coefficient for recovering AP shell pen damage is a little bit higher than 50%, given the nature of the super heal, although I cannot find confirmation on that anywhere. It's just something I suspect. The only real dangerous damage to the Conqueror or any battleship is the Citadel, and as these two clips aptly demonstrate, I hope, you can protect the Citadel from a Yamato, even if he can overmatch the upper part of your belt armor and your bow and stern armor. Also, the Conqueror is very good at deleting destroyers, much like the Nelson, the King George V, and even the Monarch. In the course of this little sequence here, we've been engaged by the Yamato, an HE spamming cruiser, and a destroyer. The Yamato is now tied up with somebody else, but we have reduced his hit points significantly, and realistically, once our repair party comes back online, he will have taken about a quarter of our hit points, even with all the AP he has slung our way. As you can see, he's getting ready to shoot us again as we engage the heal here, and we've almost killed him. In fact, our fire, I believe, is going to take him out. There he goes, Arsonist Medal. So, as you can see, the Conqueror can deal with the Yamato, and even if it does take a lot of pen damage from it, it can recover a significant amount of those lost hit points, and the only real danger is if you get Citadeled. So, if you're having trouble dealing with Yamatos in this ship, present the kind of angle I presented to that one, and burn them down with your ridiculous high explosive. Blind shot there on the destroyer for a couple of style points, but that's all there is of relevance to show in this clip. Now on to the main feature, and I'll run down the rest of the Conqueror's stats. For the main event here, we're going to be on Fault Line, Capture the Base mode, and I'm going to run down the stats as I usually do on the Conqueror. This time though, I'm going to try something a little bit different and give you the base stats and talk about where my build actually affects them, so that you understand clearly what the base stats are and what Azerlane Nelson does to this ship. If you don't have her, I would recommend perhaps using Charles Madden, just because of the extra repair parties, but Cunningham should work well too. If you are going to use Cunningham, you might consider putting some promotion orders into Jellicoe, whose base trait increases the duration of the repair party consumable, thereby giving you a few extra hit points and maximizing your ability to get the most out of the only 2 repair parties you would get with Cunningham. In any case, the Conqueror has 74,600 hit points, which is the lowest hit points count of any of the legendary battleships so far, although that hit points count is deceiving. If you can increase the number of repair party consumables from 2 to 4 with a maxed out Master Mechanic skill, then potentially the ship has 177,720 hit points, because, as I said earlier in the video, the repair party can potentially restore 25,780 hit points with each charge. Again, obviously not all damage is 100% recoverable, so you never are going to burn through 177,000 hit points, but you can burn through well over 100,000, probably into the 120, 130,000, maybe even 140,000 range, depending on the kind of damage that you are taking in the Conqueror. So, hit points, even though they're low, that's a little bit deceiving. The repair party plays into that quite a bit. Torpedo damage reduction, 28%. Pretty low. You don't want to be taking torpedoes in this thing. You can heal 100% of flooding damage, but still, torpedoes hurt. Avoid them at all costs. The guns, there are 12 of them. They are 419 millimeters in size. Not quite as dank as the GK's 420, but pretty powerful. Base range, 17.9 kilometers. I've got it up to 19.3 with the Azerlane Nelson build and I think the Epic Booster flag. 27.7 second reload base. I've got it down to, I think, roughly 26. 45 second base turret traverse time, though, which is incredibly slow, something that I really cannot abide by, which is why I chose the mods I did. I can get it down to 36.7 seconds with Azerlane Nelson and I think a Kedrov inspiration. Otherwise, with just the mods, I can get it down to 38 seconds, a little bit more manageable than the sluggish 45. And frankly, you can test this ship out for yourself. You can see how you deal with that really slow turret traverse. It's just something that I can't abide by, so do have to improve it. Now, the damage of these shells, as you can see there against the Iowa, and as you saw earlier against the 2 Yamatos, the high explosive is outrageously powerful. We've already done 89,000 damage throughout the course of this game, and the base high explosive alpha strike, 7,200. That is per shell, and there are 12 shells. Now, if you put Azerlane Nelson on there with the Big 7 skill that increases HE damage, 8,352 with the Azerlane Nelson Big 7 skill. Ridiculous high explosive alpha strike, best in the entire game. frankly, it's getting close to overpowered territory with just how nasty these high explosive shells are. But that's not to say you should sleep on the armor piercing. 13,000 max AP damage without the Big 7 skill on Azurlane Nelson. Pretty dang good. With the Big 7 skill, 15,080. Of course, the Big 7 skill does cut down on the penetration chance for the armor piercing, which makes the shells a little bit less effective, but against cruisers, which is probably the target you should primarily be firing the armor piercing at, the damage is much like other British battleships. This thing can delete cruisers with the armor piercing, although it can hurt them very, very badly with the high explosive, as it can to battleships and destroyers. Maneuverability characteristics on the ship: 30.4 knot top speed, which is pretty fast, and a 940 meter turning circle, which is pretty wide. Not the widest at the legendary tier, but not easy in a turn. On the other hand, 17.3 second rudder shift time. I've got it to 18.2 with Azurlane Nelson. That seems, on paper, fairly unresponsive, but I found that this ship doesn't seem to be all that resistant to turning. In other words, it can change its direction pretty nimbly for a battleship, despite that big turning circle and despite the appearance of a very or relatively unresponsive rudder shift on paper. I guess 18 seconds isn't that bad compared to other battleships in the game, but I digress. Detectability. With the concealment mod, 13.4. I believe the base detectability is 13.9. And with this rank 11 Condo inspiration, I've got the concealment down to 12.9. If you want to spec more into Condo, which perhaps I might do when this ship is fully released, I suspect you could get this concealment down to maybe 12.5 kilometers, making it the stealthiest battleship in the game. Now you might think that is useless, but unless you have a destroyer in that range that you can't see spotting you, you are going to be undetected except by the stealthiest cruisers. There are some cruisers in the game with detectabilities similar to the Conquerors with the concealment mod and the Condo inspiration, so you may even be able to outspot some cruisers with a maxed Condo inspiration, and your ability to outspot cruisers and battleships can, when you are not being spotted by a destroyer, allow you to dictate the terms of engagements. There is an example of the armor piercing against a broadside Azuma, obviously a target that is quite susceptible to armor-piercing damage. That puts us over the 200,000 damage done threshold. And notice, we have burned through a lot of our heals. The Iowa and the Grosse Kurfürst earlier in the game were dealing a lot of pen damage to us. But the point in this ship really isn't to avoid taking damage so much, but to take the damage and then reprint yourself a new ship with the insane repair party. If you haven't noticed by the length of this video and how much time I've spent talking about the Conqueror, then I'll tell you right now, I'm pretty biased. I love this ship. I like it a lot, although I am concerned because I do think it is perhaps a little bit too powerful. And when it gets fully implemented in the game, I suspect that the high explosive might be toned down just a little bit. 220,000 damage done with 10 fires. I don't think I actually said the fire chance on this. Get ready for this. 48%. So pretty much every time you fire high explosive from these guns at a target, you are guaranteed a fire. Not 100% of the time, but a lot of the time. There, we take the Iowa out with the high explosive. It actually lit 2 fires, wasted on the dead target. But, yeah, this HE is ridiculous. It's it almost makes the Nelson's HE, which until the Conqueror showed up in the game, was the best battleship HE across any battleship in the game, almost makes the Nelson's HE look like cruiser HE in comparison. The best way to describe the Conqueror's HE, I suppose, is hard-hitting nuclear battleship HE. It is absolutely ridiculous. We've racked up 236,000 damage, and there are still more hit points to take in the course of this battle. It's just unfortunate that Jean Bart is on such low health, and after he goes down, the only targets left are 2 cruisers, which also don't have a whole lot of health. Otherwise, I suspect you could, or I could have easily done over 300,000 damage in just this game. In fact, looking at the official World of Warships Legends Discord server, where they have the records, the damage records in the channels near the bottom of the channel list, I think the current Conqueror record is something outrageous, nearly approaching 400,000 damage, and that is because of this ridiculously powerful HE. In fact, for this ship, the high explosive, there's no reason to not make it the primary shell type you shoot. Basically, shoot it at everything. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and switch to the armor piercing if there is a cruiser giving you a flat broadside, or if you come up against a cruiser whose frontal armor you can overmatch, such as perhaps a Cleveland. Again, these 419mm guns are essentially glorified 16-inch guns, so they can overmatch anything that other 16-inch guns can overmatch. Otherwise, though, the HE more than does the job, and it can get fairly devastating hits on cruisers, as you see there against the Azuma. So, how to play this ship? I think it's more of a long-range HE spamming battleship, essentially. You definitely don't want to get too close, and if you can help it, you don't necessarily want to be the sole focus of all the enemies around you. At the same time, the ship is an incredible tank with its heals, so you don't want to be shy about getting shot at. Any damage that is inflicted upon you that you can heal up with your repair parties is damage that is not being inflicted to your teammates. So this thing does play the role of tanky battleship very well, despite all the damage it does take. It tanks in a similar way to HMS Nelson, and that's part of the reason I like it as much as I do. That's about the end of the battle, though. 272,000 damage done, and pretty good game in the Conqueror. I think this is probably my favorite of the 3 legendary rentals. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and consider subscribing if you'd like to see more. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.